My name is Alice. That evening I stepped into the restaurant. The warm golden light shone on each crystal wine glass. I knew right away. I was not welcome. The dinner before my sister-in-law Clarissa's wedding was held here. It was at a fancy Italian restaurant. It looked out over the Hudson River. Everything was perfectly set up, from the white flowers on the tables to the soft piano music playing. But one thing was missing. There was no seat for me. I stood in the middle of the room. I felt invisible. A few guests looked at me quickly, then looked away, as if I were a waiter who came at the wrong time. I looked around for the sign with names. Nothing. On the long table covered in silk were name cards written by hand. They looked fancy. They clearly showed who was favoured. Mine was not there. Clarissa stood up from the head of the table. Her dress was like champagne-coloured satin. It fit her body tightly, like it was made just for that moment of feeling proud. She held her wineglass and walked towards me. Her voice was overly sweet and sharp like a knife. Alice? Oh my gosh, you came. We only reserve seats for the people actually in the ceremony. A few quiet laughs came from the group behind her. They were mostly friends of my husband's family, from the world of money, people who liked talking about investments more than making eye contact. I turned to look at Ethan. My husband. He was by the bar with his parents. He did not look at me. Not one glance, not one step towards me. He raised his glass to an older man in a suit with thin lines, and laughed, as if I was not being made to feel small in front of everyone. Do you want me to say the invitation again? Clarissa continued, tilting her head slightly. I am sure you understand. This is a family-only gathering. I felt my back get stiff. My heart beat with a cold rhythm. I had dealt with Clarissa for 3 years. The looks from the side, the fake compliments that hid insults. But this time she did it in front of both families, and Ethan just stood there, acting like nothing was happening. I smiled. It was a small smile, steady and calm. Of course. Maybe I should go, freshen up a bit. I turned away. My heels made sounds on the marble floor. No one stopped me. No one asked if I needed anything. But inside me something changed. I did not leave the party. I just stepped outside. I stood on the balcony. It looked out over New York City. The city lights glowed under the sky. The night breeze touched my cheek. It brought me back from the haze. I opened my clutch. I took out my phone and sent a short message. No extra words, no repeating. That message was the start for everything Clarissa could not even start to imagine. 6 days after the dinner, I walked into the annual Harper Foundation Gala. This event brought together almost all the rich people on the East Coast. The party was held at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, under bright crystal chandeliers, with soft music played live. It was so perfectly chosen. It could have been matched to the guests' money accounts. Clarissa was one of the people hosting this year. She wore a dark red dress. It clung to her, like ambition. She had a diamond bracelet. It was big enough to reflect light across the room. Beside her stood her father, Charles Whitaker. He was the head of Whitaker Holdings. It was the 4th largest real estate company in the country. He was the man who always treated me like a cheap accessory, one his son Ethan had mistakenly brought home. But that night, the most important person was not Clarissa or Charles. It was Franklin Hawthorne. He was the main sponsor of the gala. He was the famous CEO of Hawthorne Group, a company that manages billions in investments across the US. I knew Franklin was not there just to be nice. He was the type who never got out of a car, without knowing exactly whose hand he would shake at the end of the room. And I also knew Clarissa was aiming for a communications director job. at Hawthorne's Charity Foundation. She called it the last golden ticket, to make her status as a modern woman icon solid. Around 8:00 p.m., Clarissa took the stage. Lifting a glass of champagne, the room became silent. "I would like to express my deepest thanks to Mr. Franklin Hawthorne," she began. Her voice was sweet, like chocolate, with a sharp aftertaste. "What an honor it is to have you here." Forbes once called him the investment eagle, the eye that never sleeps. A few polite laughs followed. Clarissa smiled, and then she said something hurtful. "I used to think that nickname meant you were always watchful, but now I am thinking, maybe you just do not need sleep. With the number of companies Hawthorne Group bought last year, I doubt you have had time to take a nap." The temperature in the room clearly dropped. Franklin gave a small smile, but his eyes did not. "Oh, and of course," Clarissa added, "with vision like that, who else could have bought out a whole hospital system and turned it into a group of luxury wellness spas?" No one laughed this time, just the quiet sound of a glass hitting a plate. I caught Charles Whittaker's eye. His face had gone pale. His fingers gripped his wine glass so tightly. They turned white. Franklin stood up. He walked away without saying a word. Clarissa probably thought she was impressing everyone, with talk that would be in the New York Times, but she had just done what even people who worked on Wall Street feared: publicly making fun of Franklin Hawthorne. I felt a chill down my spine, but not from fear. It was the moment I knew. The problems had started. Soon after, I quietly went out to the hallway, with the only person there who made me feel like myself: Natalie Hawthorne, Franklin's daughter, and my best friend since college, unlike her father. Natalie did not like these parties. She was only there because she had to be. "She seriously thinks that scored her points," Natalie whispered. Her tone was dry and sarcastic. I stayed silent. "My dad is never going to forget this," she added. "He has been looking for a reason to cut ties with the Whittakers for months. Clarissa just gave him one." I looked at her. "You sure?" Natalie nodded. "He called legal the second he left the room. Trust me, that wedding, no honeymoon. They will be spending their break dealing with stock problems." I looked back inside. Clarissa was still smiling, proud, like she had just won a fight over who would buy something. She had no idea. That toast was the first shot in a war. And this time, I was not just the one being hurt. I was ready. I used to think I would never become the kind of person who planned revenge. I believed in things happening on their own, and stepping back, letting the world fix itself. But 3 years as a Whittaker daughter-in-law taught me this. The world does not fix itself. The best manipulators are the ones who make the rules, and break them when you are not looking. After the gala, while Clarissa enjoyed praise from the news, I sat alone in my small office on the 34th floor. It was the only place in our home my mother-in-law had not touched. On the screen was a map of Whittaker Holdings' money structure. I had quietly put it together over the past year. It showed tangled links between smaller companies, loans based on stock, and risky deals that only gave rights to one person, all tied to money from the Hawthorne Group. Clarissa thought next week's wedding rehearsal was about dresses, scented candles, and drink menus. For me, it was about timing. I pulled out my phone. My hand was shaking slightly, not from fear, but from knowing this call would change everything. "This is Alice Whittaker, Ethan's wife," I said as Franklin Hawthorne's deep voice answered. "I hope I'm not calling too late." "It is never too late when something interesting is involved, Miss Alice," he replied. He sounded clearly surprised. "What can I do for you?" I took a deep breath. I know you are considering pulling your investment from Whittaker Holdings. Silence followed. I am not calling to stop that, I continued. I am calling to ask, if I gave you a strong reason to make the process faster, would you be willing to act, right before Clarissa's rehearsal dinner? On the other end, Franklin let out a low, dry laugh. There was no humour in it. I always knew you were smarter than you showed, but I did not expect you to be this strategic. I do not need to be recognised, I replied. My voice was steady. I need you to act at the right moment. There was a long pause. Then he said, I will call my legal team, and you should know if this goes forward. There is no taking it back. I am not looking to take it back, I said. I hung up. My hand rested on a folder labelled Whittaker Confidential. Every page was a part of my life over the past few years. The shame, the being dismissed, the way people looked through me, like I was a ghost in their family. I used to stay silent for Ethan, because I thought he was not like them. But the night Clarissa quietly removed my name from the table, and Ethan just stood there, smiling with a martini in his hand, I knew I had been alone for far too long. 2 days later, I met Natalie at a small cafe in Soho. She had changed her work jacket for a light brown sweater and a dark grey scarf. But the sharp glint in her eyes, that same look you would expect from the daughter of a legendary investor, was still there. He has already spoken with the board, Natalie said directly. Funds will be pulled at exactly 8:00 p.m. Friday, right when Charles takes the stage. I nodded. That was the night of the rehearsal dinner. Charles would be standing in the centre of the ballroom, in front of news people, partners, and close family friends, boasting about a strategic connection between Whittaker and a new investor, something he believed would restart his company after 2 years of bad investments. He trusts you, Natalie added. Her voice was low. And me. I think you are. Dangerous and brilliant. I did not smile. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own story. Clarissa had no idea that by choosing to shame me, she had created the one enemy she could not predict. Quiet, patient, and waiting for the right moment. And that Friday night, under sparkling lights and the sound of crystal wine glasses clicking, a brand new chapter would begin. Not the storybook bride chapter, but the first act of a company falling apart. The next morning, the main headlines in every financial news outlet read, Whittaker Holdings plummets, Golden Alliance disappears. Clarissa and Alexander's wedding, the one that had been talked about everywhere for weeks, was cancelled by noon. No press release, no apology, just a short email sent to guests. The subject line was, Tomorrow's ceremony will no longer happen as planned. The Whittaker estate in Long Island, once decorated with a wedding tent, special chairs, and even a special fountain, now looked like a place that had been left behind. The people who worked for the event showed up before sunrise to take everything down. I stood on the second-floor balcony, looking out at the backyard. Clarissa sat motionless on a white plastic chair, still in her silk robe. Her hair was loosely tied. Her eyes were swollen from not sleeping, and too many tears. But I knew she was not crying over love. Clarissa loved power, not the man beside her, and this morning she had lost both, that night. Ethan came home. He still smelled of old wine and confusion. He closed the door gently, saying nothing. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table. The silence felt long between us. Eventually he spoke first. I do not get it. What just happened? I looked him straight in the eye. I think you know better than anyone. Your family played with fire for too long. Ethan sighed, leaning back in his chair, eyes tired. Clarissa, she is falling apart. She lost her sponsors. The media stopped covering her. All the fashion brands that sent dresses pulled out. Even the diamond jewelry she showed off was taken back. It turns out it was bought using company money. I said nothing. I just poured more tea into his cup. My dad is being called for an internal hearing, suspected of illegal stock trading. He used most of his shares as loan security just weeks before the collapse. The board has temporarily removed his power. Ethan spoke like he was telling a story from a documentary, like it had nothing to do with his own family. I recognized the shock. He had not yet realized where he stood in the ruins. "Did you know this would happen?" he asked slowly. No blame, just a sincere question. I looked down at the teacup in my hands. Then I answered softly, like a breath. I knew they would pay a price. How high that price would be was completely their choice. A long silence passed. Ethan nodded, his eyes still distant. "It is strange. You are nothing like anyone else in this family, and maybe that is the only reason I still love you." I looked up. In his eyes was something new. Not fear, not disappointment, respect. For the first time in years within the Whittaker household, I was not being judged by where I came from or what school I went to. I was the one who stood up at the right moment and did not lose her self-worth. In the days that followed, the bad news came like falling pieces. The office in Manhattan was taken by the bank for money owed. The fancy apartment where Clarissa once filmed her life was taken back. She removed her social media pages after her so-called friends stopped following her. She deleted group photos and gave private talks to news sites, saying, "Clarissa was never truly genuine." Then came a call from Natalie. She invited me to lunch at a small restaurant in Brooklyn. When I arrived, she placed a small dark blue velvet box on the table. "From my father," she said. "He said this is a reward for the only person in the Whittaker family who actually understood the market." I opened the box. Inside was a silver pen. The tip had complex designs. On the inside of the cap, words were carved. "Patience is a kind of wisdom." I smiled and put the pen in my coat pocket. Not because I needed a reward, but because I knew. This was the final recognition, and the one that truly mattered. 3 weeks after Whittaker Holdings officially said it had no money, I returned to the Long Island mansion one last time. The house, once full of fresh flowers, crystal glasses, and happy brunches, was now empty, sadly quiet. The artwork had been taken down. The place for wine was empty. The only sound in the halls was the movement of people packing things. Upstairs, I found a dark wood box. It was neatly placed in the corner of Clarissa's bedroom. Inside were the jewels she once used to show her status. Black pearl necklaces, a big emerald ring once shown in a fancy magazine, and blue earrings that had caused talk at a party. I picked up each one, feeling the weight, not of the metal, but of what they once meant. A world built on being proud, dishonesty, and cold ambition. I did not keep them. I brought everything to the main office of HopeWorks Foundation. It is a fund that gives money for school to poor children. When I gave the box to the CEO, she looked at me in disbelief. "Are you sure each piece could be sold for a lot of money at auction?" I nodded. "Use them to create something that actually matters." A week later, I received a thank you letter. The pieces would be shown at the spring charity auction. For the first time. They would not be worn behind closed doors. They would be in the spotlight. No longer signs of status, but of opportunity. Ethan and I moved out of our luxury apartment in Manhattan and into a 2-story house in Brooklyn. It was made of red bricks. No doorman, no fancy elevator, just a small yard, a few plants in pots, and the sound of kids riding bikes down the street. And yet, I felt more at peace than ever. Ethan quit his job at Whittaker shortly after the company was officially closed. He was offered a teaching job at a private business school in Brooklyn. It was not glamorous, but enough to make him smile each morning as he walked out the door. As for me, I started rebuilding my career, not in anyone else's shadow, but from the ground up, for the first time. Truly. I called Natalie. I am thinking of starting an independent financial consulting firm, I said as we sat at the cafe on the corner, focusing on openness, good values, and helping small businesses. Natalie tilted her head, her eyes lit up. The next day, I received an email from Lambert Enterprises. The sender was Damon. I believe in beginnings that are planned. My door is always open to those who choose a different path. Horizon Strategies was born that February. Ethan came up with the name. It means always looking forward. Our first office had just 4 people, 2 desks made of recycled wood and a noisy coffee machine. But I had never seen a space more full of hope. Natalie, now officially the CEO of Lambert Enterprises, after Damon became the chairman, was the first to sign a big partnership with us. Lambert did not need new partners, but they chose us for one reason. They believed in work based on real values, not trickery. Under Natalie's leadership, Lambert entered a new time. It was quieter, deeper, more human. Meanwhile, Horizon started gaining trust from family businesses, new technology companies, and groups that do not work for profit. These were the ones long ignored by the financial world, a world ruled by names like Whittaker. One day, I asked Natalie, "Do you think we are doing the right thing? Not playing the games the old world uses?" She just smiled. "Alice, sometimes changing the world starts with refusing to follow it." That night, I sat on our tiny second-floor balcony, watching the streetlights flicker below. I had a cup of tea in my hand. Ethan came up behind me and put a thick knitted sweater over my shoulders. "You have that meeting with the small investment group tomorrow, right?" I nodded. "They make toys for kids with autism. No one will lend money to them. But I think they deserve a chance." Ethan smiled. "If anyone understands how to give people a chance at the right moment, it is you." A breeze moved through the trees. I looked up at the dark sky. No stars, but completely peaceful. 3 months after Horizon Strategies officially started, I received an unexpected call from a number from another country. When I picked up, I heard Charles Whittaker's voice. It was lower, rougher, and surprisingly, without pride. "Alice, thank you for picking up. I am not calling to ask for anything. I just wanted to say I was wrong." I said nothing, not because I was angry, but because I was surprised. This was the man who once looked at me, like I was the only problem in his family's perfect picture. "I am living with my brother in Vermont," he continued, "doing freelance consulting, writing reports for a few new companies. They do not know I once ran a billion-dollar company. They just see an old man who listens." His voice stopped for a moment, then continued. "I thought I taught Clarissa everything she needed, but I never taught her how to lose. And then she lost, the hard way. Now, she's starting over." I had heard about Clarissa, after her friends stopped talking to her, and she stopped using social media. She was sent to a special school in Switzerland, a place that trained daughters of rich families in being polite and quiet. Not everyone would understand, but I did, for Clarissa. It was a punishment for her mind. Charles sighed. "I do not expect forgiveness. But if someday you think I am worth it, let me know." The call ended in silence, but for me it was a quiet finish. No anger, No money problems to solve. Just a man learning how to step down from his high place, on his own feet, that spring. Zoe sent a wedding invitation to Ethan and me. The ceremony took place in a small garden at the Museum of Modern Art. It was the place where they first met during an event to raise money. No big wedding dress, no cameras flying around, just a small group of close friends, under blooming cherry blossoms. Zoe wore a simple white silk dress. She held hands with James. He was a professor who taught about books at NYU. She had once sat next to him at a cultural event. No legal papers before marriage, no investors in sight, just honest, gentle looks between two people who never expected to find each other, in a city this loud. Ethan and I sat in the second row, next to Damon. He was now retired from being in the spotlight, but still sharp-eyed as ever. As Zoe reached the end of the path, I heard him whisper, "For the first time in my life, I am investing in something that does not need a return." Ethan held my hand under the table, without saying a word. I knew exactly what he was thinking. We had gone through the storm, not to go back to how things were, but to find a new version of us, one with no shadow of Clarissa, no pressure from the Whittaker name, just us. When the party ended, Zoe pulled me aside into a corner of the garden. "I still have the letter you sent last year. The one where you said you wanted to change how the world treats those seen as not good enough. You did it, Alice." I laughed softly, not completely, but I have learned I no longer need anyone else to define me. Zoe handed me a small box. Inside was a delicate necklace. It had a compass on it. To remind you, the right direction is not always marked on someone else's map. That night, as Ethan and I returned to Brooklyn, light rain had just fallen. We stood by the window, watching raindrops collect on the glass. Everything felt still, peaceful. Ethan placed a hand on my back. "You know something. I never thought I would be happy walking away from the old world, but because of you, I have learned how to begin a new chapter." I smiled and rested my head on his shoulder. I do not need to be famous. I do not need applause. What I have, and choose to keep, is a life that is real. A life where I do not have to ask anyone's permission to exist, where I can build good things in my own way. And if someone asks what I did to change everything, I will say this: I simply waited for the right moment and did not miss it. My story did not begin with power or status. It began with quiet years of being overlooked. But in that silence, I learned to watch, to wait, and to get back my worth, with clear thinking and strong will. Today, I live a life. It is not defined by the name on a gate, but by the values I create each day. Justice was served, not with noise, but with the quiet strength of someone who knows she no longer has anything to prove. What do you think of Alice's choices? And how those who once looked down on her changed? Share your thoughts below. And do not forget to follow the channel for more emotional, surprising, and inspiring family stories.